We would estimate this painting at $50,000 to $70,000.
Wow. Wow. Thank you.
Welcome to our channel. Today, we're counting down the 25 rarest and most expensive paintings ever revealed on the show, where forgotten family heirlooms and overlooked works of art became extraordinary fortunes overnight. The higher we climb, the more unbelievable the discoveries become. So subscribe, ring the bell, and let's uncover the hidden masterpieces that shocked everyone.
For an 18 by 22 inch canvas, at auction, that should be worth $30,000 to $50,000.
You've got to be kidding me. 30 to 50,000?
30 to 50,000, I would feel very confident in saying that. And in fact, I would expect it to make probably the upper reaches of that estimate, 40 or 50,000.
That's absolutely wonderful.
Number 1. Lynne Drexler Oil Paintings. Can two paintings that spent decades hanging quietly in a family home really be worth more than $500,000? For years, they were appreciated simply as beautiful keepsakes with sentimental value. No one imagined they would one day become part of one of the most astonishing appraisals ever featured on Antiques Roadshow. But when Lynne Drexler's market suddenly took off, everything changed overnight.
Lynn wound up leaving a number of pieces with my aunt, and when my aunt passed in 2009, I inherited them. And so I've always loved them. About a year and a half ago, I saw a New York Times article that talked about Lynne Drexler and how this artist who had been in obscurity for decades was all of a sudden getting interest. So I thought I would bring these and see if I could learn more about them.
The story didn't begin with a famous auction or an expensive purchase. It began with a friendship. The guest great-aunt was an artist who knew Lynne Drexler through the abstract expressionist community, and over the years, these paintings simply remained with the family. After Drexler passed away, her work received very little attention, and for decades, few collectors paid much notice to her paintings. Then the market shifted. Major exhibitions, museum interest, and strong auction results suddenly pushed Lynne Drexler into the spotlight. Collectors who had overlooked her work for years were now eager to own it, and the paintings hanging in this family's home suddenly became highly desirable works of art.
The works from the 50s and the early 60s are the most desirable. These are small and medium-sized paintings for her. The market has really shifted in the last few years. There have been a couple of major galleries in New York and in London and overseas that have done major shows, and so they've started moving into major collections, and they've also done very well at auction.
Both paintings were created during the late 1950s and early 1960s, the period collectors now consider the strongest of Drexler's career. As museums and major private collections competed for her work, prices rose dramatically. But even that couldn't prepare the owner for what came next.
If the smaller painting were to come to auction, I believe that value would be $50,000 to $70,000.
Wow. Wow.
The smaller painting alone carried an auction estimate of $50,000 to $70,000. An incredible figure. Yet the biggest surprise was still to come.
And the larger painting, I believe if this painting were at auction, it would sell for between $300,000 and $500,000.
Oh my goodness. I'm speechless. Wow. I mean, I've always just liked them, but I would never have imagined.
What began as a pair of paintings passed between artist friends had quietly remained in one family's home for decades before the art world finally recognized just how extraordinary they really were. Number 2. 1892 H.F. Farny Watercolor and Gouache Painting. What could possibly turn a picture once valued at only a few $100s into a masterpiece worth hundreds of thousands? This time, the answer began with a mosquito.
Not sure if it's a print or a painting, but when I got it, there was a mosquito underneath the glass. So I took it out to the front yard and I opened it up to get the mosquito out so I could take it with me to college. And then it kind of scared me a little. I closed it back up immediately because it looked like it might be real.
For years, the family believed this was nothing more than an ordinary print hanging above the grandmother's bed. Even previous appraisals never suggested otherwise. The picture was simply grouped with the household furnishings and quietly forgotten. Everything changed when a tiny mosquito prompted the owner to open the frame.
It was appraised in like a general house appraisal twice. In 1998, it was appraised as a print at $200, and in 2004, it was appraised at $250.
Twice it was appraised. Twice it was identified as a print worth only a few $100s. But a closer look by the Antiques Roadshow experts revealed something completely different. It was an original work by Henry Francois Farny, one of America's most celebrated painters of Native American life. Its outstanding composition, excellent condition, and highly desirable subject matter made it exactly the kind of painting collectors hope to find.
So if we were going to put this in an auction today, I would suggest an estimate of $200,000 to $300,000.
From just a few $100s to an auction estimate of $200,000 to $300,000. In an instant, every previous appraisal became meaningless.
Oh my God. That's so much. I don't even know what to say. Should I have left the mosquito in the back?
No, it's good that the bug wasn't there anymore.
A tiny mosquito unexpectedly became part of one of the most unforgettable appraisals in Antiques Roadshow history. Had the owner never opened the frame that day, the artwork might have remained nothing more than a print worth a few $100s. Instead, the family discovered they had owned an original Henry Francois Farny painting worth as much as $300,000. That's what makes Antiques Roadshow so fascinating. Sometimes all it takes is one small detail to completely change the story of a work of art. Number 3. 1961 Leonora Carrington painting. At first glance, this painting feels less like a work of art and more like a scene from a strange dream. Its mysterious creatures, unsettling figures, and surreal imagery immediately raise one question. Who could have created a world like this? The answer is Leonora Carrington, one of the most influential women of the Surrealist movement and an artist whose true importance wasn't fully recognized by the art market until decades later.
I know there's an artist by the name of Leonora Carrington, and that she lived in Mexico. Originally, she came from Europe, but that she came to Mexico after the Second World War. Much more than that I don't know, except I know that she was a surrealist.
Born in England, Carrington later moved to France before eventually settling in Mexico, where she created many of her most celebrated works. After the trauma of World War II, her personal experiences shaped a style unlike anyone else's, blending fantasy, symbolism, and reality into deeply personal paintings. That's exactly why her artwork continues to fascinate collectors around the world.
And after the war, she suffered a nervous breakdown. And I think these pieces are very personal. I think that's part of that, is her coming to grips with the nightmares and the imagery in her life. And you look at this piece, it's all very macabre and surreal.
What makes this story even more remarkable is how the painting entered the family. The owner's parents purchased it in Mexico more than 50 years ago, long before Leonora Carrington became a major name at international auctions. It wasn't bought as an investment or a future treasure. It was simply a painting they loved, and eventually it became the family's favorite piece. For decades, it quietly remained on the wall while the art world slowly caught up.
When they downsized, they knew that it was the one piece of all their artwork that I really adored, and so they gave it to me.
Then, everything changed. Major museum exhibitions, record-breaking auction prices, and growing recognition of women surrealists dramatically increased demand for Carrington's work. Suddenly, paintings like this became some of the most desirable works on the market. That brought everyone to the moment they had been waiting for.
Right now, I would expect an auction estimate of $200,000 to $300,000 these days.
They bought well. Amazing.
What began as a painting purchase simply because a family loved it was now valued at an astonishing $200,000 to $300,000. A decision made more than half a century ago had quietly turned into an extraordinary investment. Sometimes the art market doesn't create value. It simply takes the world a very long time to recognize the greatness that was there from the very beginning. And if Leonora Carrington's story is one of a remarkable talent whose brilliance wasn't fully recognized until much later, the next story follows a birthday gift purchased with 2 years' worth of hard-earned savings, only to become decades later one of the most valuable illustrations ever appraised on Antiques Roadshow. Number 5. Henry Siddons' MOWBRAY painting. Now this is the kind of painting most people would walk past every single day without thinking twice. It wasn't locked in a vault. It wasn't treated like a museum treasure. It was hanging in a bedroom. The owner grew up with it, woke up to it, and saw it so often that it simply became part of the family's everyday life. But on Antiques Roadshow, familiar objects have a habit of hiding huge surprises. And this one had a name behind it that changed everything.
Tim, your grandfather was a really interesting artist, but this is just such a luscious painting. You were telling me that you would wake up to this painting in your bedroom when you were 16 years old.
Yeah, he considered his murals much more important than his easel paintings like this, but I'm much more enamored by these paintings than the murals.
For years, the painting was meaningful because it came from his grandfather, Henry Siddons MOWBRAY. But MOWBRAY wasn't just a family artist. He was connected to some of the biggest names and grandest projects of the American Renaissance, especially the murals created for wealthy mansions in Newport and New York. That is what makes this smaller easel painting so interesting. It may not be as massive as his murals, but it shows the elegance, color, and classical style that made his work so admired.
He was great friends with Augustus St. Gaudens. The great mansions that were being built in Newport and New York have design programs that were commissioned by these architects that your grandfather worked on. It's just a terrific example of the painting and of the period.
The expert could see it right away. The refined palette, the graceful composition, the unmistakable feel of the period. This wasn't just a family keepsake. It was a strong example from an important American artist. So now came the big question. What was it worth?
Given that, at auction, I would estimate it at between $50,000 and $75,000.
Wow. I could never sell it, unfortunately. It would stay in the family.
The painting was valued at $50,000 to $75,000. Not bad for something that once simply hung in a teenager's bedroom. But the owner's reaction made the moment even better. He wasn't thinking about selling. For him, this was still a piece of childhood, family history, and memory. The appraisal changed the price, but it didn't change what the painting meant. Number 6. 1955 ERNA ROSENSTEIN Oil Painting. Not every painting is meant to impress with beauty alone. Some leave a lasting impression because every brushstroke carries the weight of a real human story. At first glance, this painting feels unsettling. Its distorted forms, dark atmosphere, and haunting imagery seem almost dreamlike. But the deeper the experts looked, the more they realized this wasn't simply a work of art. It was the story of someone who survived one of history's darkest chapters.
I brought an ERNA ROSENSTEIN painting. I know that ERNA ROSENSTEIN was a Holocaust survivor. It's painted in 1955. I've had it for about 37 years. It was from an auction house where they were auctioning stuff for a charity.
ERNA ROSENSTEIN became one of the leading figures of modern Polish art, but before she was known as an artist, she was a Holocaust survivor. The war tore her family apart, forcing her to live under false identities simply to stay alive. Those experiences never left her. After the war, she returned to painting, transforming memories of fear, loss, and survival into deeply personal works that were unlike anything else being created at the time.
Her mother and father were murdered in a forest. She was there. She was wounded in the whole experience, but she did escape. And she spent the next several years living under false identities and moving around trying to just survive the war.
That's why Rosenstein's paintings feel both surreal and deeply emotional. The strange imagery isn't simply imagination. It reflects memories she carried with her for the rest of her life. Every canvas became more than a painting. It became a powerful piece of history.
She did really spend the rest of her career using those experiences in her art. And we see some of that in this painting.
I remember they would say they were going to get showered. They entered here and they got burnt. And they also did experimentations on the bodies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have some real tough imagery here
Right.
that I'm sure she didn't like reliving as she was painting, but it was something she felt really strongly that she wanted to communicate.
Today, collectors seek Erna Rosenstein's work for more than its artistic importance. They see it as a rare witness to the 20th century, told through the eyes of someone who lived it. That was exactly why the expert had no hesitation when it came time to reveal the estimate.
If this were to come up to auction today, we would estimate this painting at $50,000 to $70,000.
Wow, thank you.
The painting was valued at $50,000 to $70,000. But this time, the silence in the room wasn't caused by the price alone. It came from the realization that every brushstroke preserved a piece of history. Sometimes, the greatest value of a painting isn't measured by the market. It's measured by the story it continues to tell, even decades after it was created. And if this painting was born from survival and remembrance, the next one tells a very different story, one inspired by the breathtaking landscapes of Alaska, where winter skies and the northern lights shaped the vision of one of the state's most celebrated artists. Number 7. 1964 Magnus COLCORD HEURLIN oil painting. Not every valuable painting is discovered in a thrift store or at an auction. Some treasures never disappear at all. This painting spent nearly 60 years exactly where it was meant to be, hanging in a family home, quietly watching generations grow up before Antiques Roadshow finally revealed what it was truly worth.
What can you tell me about this wonderful rusty HEURLIN?
Well, I know my grandfather got it commissioned back in 1964. They were living in Fairbanks, and they took the family on a drive down to Esther, where Rusty lived and worked. My dad was about 10 or 11 back then. He remembers faintly, but my grandfather went in a separate room with Rusty and discussed what kind of painting he wanted, and then they left, and about 3 months later, they had this nice painting delivered to their home.
What makes this story unusual is that the painting was never purchased from a gallery. The owner's grandfather went directly to Magnus COLCORD HEURLIN, better known throughout Alaska as Rusty, and commissioned a painting for the family. It wasn't meant to be an investment. He simply wanted a piece of Alaska that would stay with the family for generations. And that's exactly what happened.
They gifted it to me and my wife last year, so we have it hanging in our house. It definitely has a lot of sentimental value. My parents grew up in Fairbanks. I grew up in California. They moved down to California in the 80s, but I always grew up hearing about Alaska, wanting to go explore and move back. And this painting was part of it. It just really captures the mystique and the frontier of Alaska. So I always had this in my mind of just going to the unknown. And then I finally moved up when I was 18 and made the dream come true. Yeah.
To the owner, this painting represents far more than an Alaskan landscape. It brings back memories of his grandparents, his childhood, and the dream of one day living in Alaska himself. To the appraiser, however, it perfectly captures everything collectors admire about Rusty HEURLIN's work: snow-covered wilderness, dog sleds, the northern lights, and above all, the remarkable sense of quiet that became his signature. That's exactly why his paintings remain so highly regarded in Alaska.
The northern lights, the palette, it's a really gentle, subtle blue. What I really like about the painting is he really was able to capture quiet. That's an amazing accomplishment to me.
Once the artist, date, and quality had all been confirmed, there was only one thing left to reveal.
I would give it an auction estimate of between $40,000 and $60,000.
Wow, that's more than I thought.
And for insurance, I think maybe around $75,000.
Okay. Wow. Was not expecting that. That's quite astounding. Don't plan on selling it. It's a family piece.
The painting received an auction estimate of $40,000 to $60,000, with an insurance value of approximately $75,000. But the owner's response came without hesitation. He had no intention of selling it, because for this family, the painting's greatest value has never been measured in dollars. It has always been part of their story, and that's exactly where it will remain. Number 8. LYONEL FEININGER Art Collection. Not every valuable work of art owes its worth to the painting itself. Sometimes, the greatest treasure is the story proving exactly where it came from. And in this case, everything began with a neighbor. before ending with a collection that left the experts genuinely excited.
You have an interesting family connection with this artist, I believe.
Right. He knew my parents, and he also knew my grandparents. He lived in the same apartment building as my parents.
This family never bought Lionel Feininger's artwork from a gallery or an auction house. They actually knew him. One of the 20th century's most important modern artists happened to live in the same apartment building as the guest's parents. That personal connection created something money simply can't buy. But that was only the beginning.
This was a birth gift that he gave to my parents for me. My mother always described him as walking up and ringing the doorbell and saying, "This is for the little one."
When the guest was born, Feininger personally brought several of his own works to the family's door as a gift for the newborn. For decades, those gifts remained carefully preserved by the family. Then the owner revealed one more item that immediately caught the appraiser's attention.
It's this letter shortly after I was born.
Incredibly poignant.
It was a handwritten letter from Lionel Feininger himself. In the art world, documents like this are incredibly rare. The letter didn't just confirm that the artworks were authentic gifts. It documented the entire ownership history directly from the artist to the family, creating what collectors call outstanding provenance.
The letter is terrific provenance. This is the kind of provenance we dream of. We see so many of the fakes of them, and then you brought this letter out. He knew your parents, these were gifts.
With the provenance firmly established, the appraiser began valuing each work in the collection, and every estimate made that handwritten letter even more valuable.
So all in all, it's going to be $40,000 to $60,000.
Wow, that's fabulous.
The entire collection was estimated at $40,000 to $60,000. But what impressed the experts most wasn't the total value. It was the opportunity to see nearly flawless provenance, something even multi-million-dollar collections often cannot provide. Sometimes, the greatest value of a work of art isn't found in the artist's signature alone. It's found in the story that proves exactly how the artwork found its way home. Number 9. 1959 Édouard Cortés oil painting. What if the value of an entire painting came down to a detail so small that almost no one would ever notice it? Not the signature, not the frame, just a tiny pinhole. And that seemingly insignificant mark was exactly what convinced the experts they were looking at an original work by one of the 20th century's most beloved painters of Parisian street scenes.
A light bulb went off and I ran downstairs, and sure enough, this painting that had been hanging on our wall for 40 years said Édouard Cortés.
This story began in a way that will sound familiar to many Antiques Roadshow viewers. One evening, the owner happened to watch the show and noticed a painting that looked almost identical to the one hanging in his family's home. That single moment of curiosity was enough to bring the painting in for an appraisal. Otherwise, it might have remained on the same wall for many more years without anyone questioning what it really was.
Well-known artists, and he was best known for his Parisian street scenes.
He made Paris pretty much his subject matter from about 1900 onwards.
Édouard Cortés became famous for capturing the charm of Paris after the rain, with glowing streetlights reflected across wet cobblestones and elegant city streets. His distinctive style has made his paintings favorites among collectors around the world. But beauty alone isn't enough to authenticate an artwork. The experts were looking for one tiny detail. One detail that almost everyone else would overlook.
What he used to do was he would take a little pin and he would stick it in the canvas. And he would do that to establish the vanishing point, to determine the perspective in the painting and in the drawing. Yeah, a little pinprick right here. So it could be good news. Do you see that?
Yes, I do. I thought it was a flaw.
No.
It was a tiny pinhole left in the painting's surface. While he worked, Cortés often used a pin to secure his painting board, leaving behind a nearly invisible mark that appears on authentic examples of his work. That single trace was enough to confirm the painting's authenticity and completely change its story.
At auction, that should be worth $30,000 to $50,000.
You've got to be kidding me. 30 to 50,000?
30 to 50,000. I would feel very confident in saying that.
Wow. That's really exciting.
I hope those are tears of joy, by the way.
They are tears of joy.
The painting was given an auction estimate of $30,000 to $50,000. A work the family had simply kept because they loved looking at it had quietly become a valuable original. Remarkably, the entire discovery began with a single episode of Antiques Roadshow and a tiny pinhole that almost nobody would have noticed. Sometimes, in the art world, the smallest details unlock the biggest discoveries. Number 10. Ohio Folk Art Double Portrait. At first glance, this looks like a simple portrait of two children standing beside their faithful dog. There isn't the signature of a famous master. There isn't a luxurious frame or an elaborate historical story. Yet within moments, the appraiser declared it one of the finest Ohio folk portraits he had ever encountered. That immediately raised one question. What made this seemingly ordinary painting so extraordinary?
And this was a family painting?
The people that owned it, the parents died, and the children had no room for it anymore, and so I was able to buy it from them. They were distant cousins.
Unlike many discoveries on Antiques Roadshow, this wasn't a forgotten family heirloom. The owner intentionally purchased it from another collector and even borrowed money from his father to make the purchase. He wasn't trying to predict the market. He simply fell in love with the painting the moment he saw it. Looking back, that decision would prove to be far better than he ever imagined.
It's a wonderful Ohio painting. When you first came up to the folk art table, we saw this and we were saying, oh, well, this has got to be somewhere back east. And then we started looking at it, and really it is a Midwestern painting. And there's very little body of work to talk about Ohio folk art portraiture. What did you pay for it?
I paid a lot for it because I really, really wanted it.
The painting possesses nearly everything serious folk art collectors hope to find. Beautifully painted children, a loyal family pet, rich colors that have survived for almost 2 centuries, exceptional preservation, and perhaps most importantly, an unidentified artist whose identity remains a mystery to this day. Ironically, that mystery only makes the painting even more desirable.
We all agreed $30,000 to $40,000 is an easy estimate for this, and there might be a lot of upside if it were to come to auction. It's a great folk art portrait.
The portrait receives an auction estimate of $30,000 to $40,000, a result that completely exceeded the owner's expectations. But the most satisfying part wasn't the value itself. It was discovering that the painting he had purchased simply because he loved it had turned out to be one of the finest examples of Ohio folk art. Sometimes collectors spend years chasing the perfect investment. This owner did something much simpler. He trusted his instincts. And in this case, those instincts turned out to be worth tens of thousands of dollars. Number 11. W. Milner Knight Portrait Painting. After a series of remarkable discoveries, sometimes the artwork that captures an expert's attention isn't a royal masterpiece or a famous museum painting. It's simply a portrait that has been hanging quietly in the same family home for years. No famous provenance, no dramatic backstory. Just an ordinary wedding gift until one nearly invisible detail changed everything.
Well, she's a real beauty, this girl, isn't she? Did you inherit it? Or?
We did, yes, from my husband's parents, who had it bought for a wedding present.
For the family, this was simply a wedding gift that had been passed down through the generations. But the moment the appraiser saw it, he was reminded of the work of Lawrence Alma Tadema, one of Britain's greatest painters of classical scenes inspired by ancient Greece and Rome. The marble architecture, the soft Mediterranean light, and the elegant composition all pointed in that direction. At first glance, it seemed like an obvious conclusion.
When I see it first, I immediately think of the great Victorian painter of these sort of subjects who was called Lawrence Alma Tadema.
But experienced appraisers never stop at first impressions. He carefully examined every inch of the painting. Then, on the edge of the marble bench, he discovered a signature so small it almost disappeared into the paint itself. That tiny detail completely changed the identity of the artwork.
And then I suddenly came across it down here, this tiny little signature in the lip of the marble here. W. Milner Knight.
The artist wasn't Lawrence Alma Tadema after all. It was W. Milner Knight, a lesser-known painter whose elegant classical scenes remain highly regarded by collectors. Sometimes an unfamiliar name can still produce a painting with remarkable market appeal.
Has he painted very attractive pictures like this one? Got it insured?
Just on the house insurance.
No, it should certainly be insured separately. I think you should probably insure it for something like £4,000 or £5,000. And certainly you could expect £3,000 or £4,000 at auction.
My brother bought it from my mum from a jumble sale when he was young for 2p.
For 2p? The painting was given an auction estimate of £3,000 to £4,000, with an insurance value of approximately £4,000 to £5,000. That alone would have been an impressive surprise. But the biggest twist came at the very end. Years earlier, the guest's brother had picked it up at a jumble sale for just 2 pence. A forgotten bargain had quietly become a painting worth thousands of pounds. Number 12. Bob Ross Alaskan Oil Paintings. This is probably the most recognizable name in today's countdown. Millions of people know Bob Ross for his trademark curly hair, his calming voice, and his famous happy little trees. But very few people have ever seen the paintings he created before becoming a television icon. And those are exactly the works that have made their way onto Antiques Roadshow.
And I actually didn't think that I'd ever possibly either see one in person. This is kind of a big deal for me personally. I watched when I was a kid, and he's the reason I picked up a paintbrush for the first time. How did you get him?
Oh, my parents got him in the 70s.
Quonset hut sale. Salvation Army.
It was a Christmas gift to my parents in the 1970s.
The appraiser's excitement said everything. These weren't the Bob Ross paintings that millions of viewers remember from television. They were created years earlier in Alaska, when Ross was still serving in the U.S. Air Force and painting landscapes on the side to earn extra income. Back then, he sold his work for just a few dollars. No one could have imagined that these humble paintings would one day become so rare that even seasoned experts had never seen examples like them in person.
So people have a very emotional connection. Look, I'm tearing up. People have such an emotional connection to Bob. And you can say whatever you want, whether you like the scenes or you don't, or they're your style, but he's therapy for so many people, and people love him, so his paintings sell for a lot of money.
Bob Ross did far more than paint landscapes. He inspired generations of people to pick up a brush and believe they could paint. That emotional connection has made his artwork increasingly desirable, especially these early Alaskan paintings which rarely appear on the market. It was finally time for the appraisal everyone was waiting for.
In the current marketplace, Bob Ross paintings like this would sell in the $15,000 to $25,000 range.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
How much did you guys pay? Do we have any prices here? So you inherited $12, you win, I think.
Mine was $5.
$5.
Paintings originally purchased for $5 and $12 were now each estimated at $15,000 to $25,000. But the surprise wasn't over yet.
There's one that recently did $41,000, and the most expensive one that we've heard of was from the very first TV show, and that did 6 figures.
Oh my.
The appraiser explained that the Bob Ross market continues to grow, with some rare works now selling for well into 6 figures. It's an extraordinary journey for an artist who simply wanted to help people enjoy painting. Sometimes the paintings that once sold for only a few dollars become the ones collectors spend decades trying to find. Number 13. Painting attributed to Franz KLINE. Not every Antiques Roadshow story ends with a definitive answer. Sometimes the most valuable thing is a question mark. Because if this painting really is by Franz KLINE, everything changes. And perhaps the most unbelievable part is that it spent years sitting quietly in a garage.
I bought it from an art dealer. I had bought numerous things from him, and I asked for something with flowers. And he showed me this, and I bought it immediately. My heart started to pound.
For how much again?
It was about $1,400.
$1,400.
Yes,
right.
it was in the art dealer's private collection.
Okay.
He said he bought it from a garage in upstate New York.
Okay.
He had bought other work from them, and they had this in the garage. It was in an old bulky frame,
Okay.
and I took that out to get the painting here. So it was in the frame.
No one expects to find a painting connected to one of the biggest names in abstract expressionism inside a garage. Even the owner brought it in simply because he thought it looked kind of interesting. But after only a few minutes of examining the work, the appraiser realized this wasn't a painting that could be judged too quickly. There was something about it that demanded a closer look.
The name that is signed here, lower left, is Franz KLINE. When you bought it, did you know who Franz KLINE was?
Yes.
Okay.
Abstract expressionist.
Exactly. So Franz Kline is one of the most famous American artists of the 20th century.
In the art world, the words attributed to carry enormous weight. They don't confirm that a painting is genuine, but they don't rule it out either. For an artist like Franz Kline, whose works have sold for tens of millions of dollars, that distinction can mean an extraordinary difference in value. That's why this painting immediately became so intriguing.
When I first got it, I tried to document it, so I contacted one of the premier art authorities on Franz Kline in the United States. He said it looks good.
Okay.
Yeah, he said I have a chance of being right.
A chance of being right.
I'll take it. It's better than nothing.
Just 3 words. It has a chance. That was the response from one of the world's leading Franz Kline scholars. He couldn't authenticate it, but he couldn't dismiss it either. Those 3 words meant the story was far from over.
Now, how much do you think it's worth today?
No idea, that's why I'm here.
Okay, if we put it in at auction as attributed to Franz Kline, I would put it at $5,000 to $7,000 as a conservative estimate. If we got some stronger expertise as a work by Franz Kline, and it could bring $15,000 to $20,000 or more.
An astonishing result for a work that had been forgotten in a garage for years. But the most fascinating part isn't the number. It's that the story still doesn't have an ending. If future research eventually confirms that this really is a Franz Kline, its value could change dramatically. Sometimes, in the art world, a single unanswered question can be worth tens of thousands of dollars. Number 14. Portrait of the K Sisters. A painting can remain exactly the same for centuries. But change the name of the artist, and its value can change with it. That's exactly what happened here. For generations, this family believed they already knew who had painted this portrait. Then the experts started asking questions.
Do you have any background information about this picture?
Well, all I know was a letter. So Mrs. K, way back in 1900, claimed that one of the ladies was her great-grandmother. And then about the 1920s, a Mr. K wrote from Calcutta, wanted to know what had happened to Mrs. K because he thought she had the original draft of this picture. But after that, it seems to have died, the history.
Yes. And so therefore, we think it's of the K sisters, do we?
Yes, one was her great-grandma, and the other was had become a Mrs. Robinson.
This is a situation art experts encounter more often than most people realize. A painting is passed down through generations, while the story of its creator gradually becomes less certain over time. Instead of relying on family tradition, the appraiser chose to focus entirely on the painting itself. Every brushstroke, every facial feature, and every detail would have to tell its own story.
Well, that's very interesting. You mention here 2 of the main British portrait painters of the 18th and 19th century, following on from Gainsborough and Reynolds. And in my opinion, I don't think it's by either of those 2 artists.
The appraiser carefully compared the painting's style, lighting, composition, and the way the faces had been painted. George Romney seemed like a reasonable possibility. Thomas Lawrence also shared certain similarities. But the more closely he looked, the more obvious it became that neither artist was the correct answer. Eventually, every clue pointed towards someone else.
This picture, in my opinion, again, is probably most likely by an artist called Sir William Beechey, who is a lesser-known artist, and in some ways perhaps a rather duller painter.
According to the appraiser, the portrait was actually painted by Sir William Beechey, one of the leading portrait artists to the British royal family during the late 18th century. Even more importantly, he identified the 2 sitters as the K sisters. After years of uncertainty, the painting had finally regained its true identity.
I would think that a picture like this, fully accepted as by Sir William Beechey, is probably going to be worth somewhere in the region of sort of 15, maybe as much as £20,000.
What is that?
Well, it's in very nice condition.
The remarkable thing is that the painting itself never changed. The only thing that changed was the name attached to it. And sometimes in the art world, discovering the right artist can be just as valuable as discovering an entirely new masterpiece. Number 15. Herman Swanevelt Landscape Painting. Not every masterpiece is recognized the moment someone sees it. Sometimes the biggest discovery begins with nothing more than a tiny mark that has quietly survived for centuries. That was exactly what happened here. A small monogram hidden in the corner of an old landscape painting would eventually lead experts to the true identity of its creator and completely transform the story behind the artwork.
Has this picture been in your family for a long time?
Yes, it has, over 100 years. It came down to my brother from a maternal grandfather, and we think it's one that he bought in Holland. An old man in Holland was bedridden, and he had a lovely collection of pictures, and he had a new picture put at the end of his bed every day to look at. But when he became very old, he decided to sell the collection. And my grandfather and another friend went over and bought up the entire collection and divided it between them.
The story began when the guest's grandfather purchased an entire collection of paintings in the Netherlands. He wasn't searching for a masterpiece. He simply bought the complete collection from an elderly gentleman who was moving out of his home. For decades, this landscape quietly remained with the family, attracting little attention until the experts decided to take a much closer look.
Well, it is a lovely picture, and as we can see here from the label, Herman Swanevelt, it is indeed by him. Labels can very often be misleading, but in this case, this picture is absolutely genuine. This can be backed up by this charming little monogram here, which is quite difficult to see, but which is H and then an intertwining V and S, which is typical for Swanevelt.
The detail that changed everything was a tiny monogram tucked into the corner of the painting. Not a full signature, just a small mark that most people would probably never notice. To specialists in old master paintings, however, it was the most important clue of all. It identified the artist as Herman Swanevelt, one of the leading Dutch Italianate landscape painters of the 17th century, celebrated for his luminous Mediterranean-inspired landscapes and remarkably peaceful atmosphere.
Regarding the quality of the picture, I think it's variable, but on the whole very nice. I think this figure here is particularly well painted, whereas perhaps other areas of the painting are not quite so good.
Once the artist had been identified, the expert turned to the painting itself. Its excellent condition, balanced composition, beautiful handling of light, and unmistakable Swanevelt style were exactly the qualities collectors hoped to find. At that point, there was only one question left. What was it worth?
Well, I think a picture in this sort of condition, which is rather dirty and has obviously been in a private collection for a long time, could well be worth in excess of £15,000 today, and possibly more.
A painting that had quietly remained inside a family collection for decades was now valued at more than £15,000. The remarkable part is that the painting itself had never changed. The only thing that changed was that experts finally restored the name of the artist after centuries of uncertainty. Sometimes, a single forgotten mark is all it takes to return a work of art to its rightful place in history. Number 16. Early 18th century English house portrait.
If every picture tells a tale, please tell me.
Well, some years ago, my father and I, we were refurbishing a room in our Tudor house, and there was a Victorian fireplace which we took out, which revealed a Tudor fireplace, and above that was layers and layers of wallpaper. So we decided to start scraping it off, and...
So this was, the wallpaper was stuck to this?
No one starts a renovation expecting to uncover a centuries-old work of art. Yet behind those aging layers of wallpaper was a painting that had almost disappeared from history. The first detail that caught the expert's attention wasn't the scene itself, it was the surface. Instead of canvas, the painting was executed on a wooden panel, a material commonly used in England during the early 18th century, immediately suggesting that the artwork was far older than anyone had imagined.
Yes.
It's obviously a smart 17th century house, and it's wonderful. I mean, the red brick glows. These houses did glow then. It's a fair bet to assume that this is a real house, it's not a fantasy house. And this, I'm sure, is by an English painter, not a Dutch painter. Say about 1700, 1710, 1720. The paneling tells us that, the whole way it's put together. We can trace the history of this sort of painting very easily.
The painting turned out to be what's known as a house portrait, a rare type of artwork that records not only a family's home, but also its gardens and surrounding estate. Many of those historic properties have long since disappeared or been dramatically altered. That makes surviving house portraits valuable not only as works of art, but also as remarkable historical records. The experts quickly realized they were looking at something truly special.
One of the interesting things about the fashion of having your house painted was that they replaced portraits. So it was actually exactly where it should have been for the fashion of the day. I think it's wonderful.
Yes.
And I think it's very interesting. I mean, I've never seen such a complete British painting of this period in a way.
Ironically, the wallpaper that concealed the painting for generations also preserved it. Shielded from sunlight and everyday environmental damage, its colors remained in remarkably beautiful condition after more than 300 years. With the examination complete, the expert was finally ready to reveal its value.
It's very difficult to price something like this, but I think at least 10 to 15,000. It's a wonderful object.
Thanks so much.
Dear, speechless. I'm speechless.
Hidden behind an old wall for centuries, the painting was now valued at £10,000 to £15,000. But the most remarkable part wasn't the estimate. It was the fact that an ordinary home renovation had brought a forgotten piece of England's history back into the light. Sometimes the greatest discoveries are waiting just behind the walls we pass every day. Number 17. Harold Harvey Cornish Landscape. Have you ever bought something just to get the item that came with it? It sounds unusual, but that's exactly how this story began. The owner was interested in only one of the two paintings being sold. The other one was little more than an extra that happened to come with the purchase. Years later, however, it was that forgotten painting that captured the attention of the experts on Antiques Roadshow.
I bought it just in the market in Portobello, in London. Portobello Road. And,
how long ago?
20 years ago.
Yeah.
And
was it in a shop or on a barrow?
On a barrow.
It was on a barrow?
On a barrow. And I was looking through the pictures was in there and then all odds and sods, and I saw another picture that I was interested, and I bought the two together.
Job lot.
I wasn't really interested in the picture just because you wanted so much for the other picture, and it
sounds as if you like the other one better.
For just £15, the guest took both paintings home. For years, this one simply hung on the wall as an ordinary decoration. No one paid much attention to the artist. No one imagined there was anything remarkable about it. That changed when the experts identified it as a work by Harold Harvey, one of the leading painters of the Newland School, best known for his beautiful Cornwall landscapes, which are highly sought after by collectors today. But the biggest surprise was still to come.
That was sent in 1961, and some of them were sold, but not this one. This was rejected as of too little value.
Few people would expect that this very painting had once been submitted to Christie's back in 1961. The result? The world-famous auction house rejected it because they didn't believe it was worth offering for sale. But the art market has changed dramatically since then. Artists who were once overlooked have become highly collectible, and Harold Harvey is a perfect example of that remarkable shift.
I think if you were to sell this picture now or put it in a sale now, you'd be looking at £8,000 to £10,000.
Oh, God.
A painting once turned away by Christie's was now estimated at £8,000 to £10,000. It was an astonishing turnaround that completely caught the owner by surprise. But the story wasn't over yet.
My wife wanted it out in the living room because you have it in the living room. She wanted it out. She said, I want to decorate the room. I want all this rubbish out.
As it turned out, the painting had been moved out of the living room simply because it didn't match the decor. After hearing the appraisal, that decision might not last much longer. That's exactly what makes Antiques Roadshow so entertaining. Sometimes the artwork no one wanted is the one that ends up becoming the most valuable treasure in the entire house. Number 18. Stanley Spencer Portrait Drawing. Not every valuable artwork begins with an auction or a major purchase. Sometimes it all starts with an ordinary conversation.
Tell me about the portrait.
My father-in-law was a marine engineer. He was in Port Glasgow awaiting a convoy. The ship was in for repair for around 2 months. And my mother-in-law was also with him, and they were staying in a lodging house, and Stanley Spencer was at the same lodging house. And they were sitting one evening in this parlour, and he said, "Sit down, Jack, and I'll draw you."
During the Second World War, the guest's father happened to be lodging in the same house as Stanley Spencer. One evening, Spencer looked at him and casually said, "Sit down, Jack, I'll draw you." There was no appointment, no commission, no discussion of payment. It was simply a spontaneous moment between two friends. That quick portrait remained with the family for decades, never imagined to be anything more than a treasured personal memory.
Did they become great friends? I mean, they were together for 2 months?
Yes, they did,
they became
actually.
friends?
What makes this drawing so special isn't just Stanley Spencer's signature. It's the story behind it. This isn't the portrait of a famous politician or a member of the aristocracy. It's an ordinary man captured by one of the most important British artists of the 20th century. Works like this reveal the side of Spencer that collectors admire most, his ability to find meaning and humanity in everyday people and everyday life.
Stanley Spencer paintings at last are getting their due recognition, and a great masterpiece could be over £1 million today. A painting.
Yes, I know.
A great masterpiece. This drawing is a beautiful drawing. It's at least we know who it's of. It's not commercially, because it's of a straightforward portrait of a man.
Yeah.
Today, Stanley Spencer's major paintings regularly sell for well over £1 million. Even intimate portrait drawings like this remain highly sought after because they preserve the unmistakable hand of the artist while offering collectors a more accessible piece of his legacy. That was why the expert had little hesitation before revealing the valuation.
But I would have thought in the region of 6 to 8, maybe £10,000.
Really?
Well, it's a marvellous drawing by, he's a very important artist.
That is a shock. I had no idea. None at all.
A drawing born from a chance meeting during wartime is now recommended for insurance at £6,000 to £10,000. Yet its greatest value has never been measured in money. It preserves a simple moment between two ordinary people, captured with a few pencil strokes and transformed over time into a small but meaningful piece of British art history. Sometimes, the most memorable works of art aren't created for the market at all. They're created simply because an artist decided to draw a new friend. Number 19. Alfred East Landscape Painting. If you had to choose between two landscape paintings hanging side by side, which one would you bet was worth more? The owner of this collection had already made up his mind years earlier. One painting had always been his favorite. The other simply came along for the ride. But just a few minutes into the appraisal, the expert surprised everyone by focusing almost entirely on the painting he had overlooked. Sometimes, in the art world, first impressions can be completely misleading.
Tell me what you think about this painting.
Without seeming sophisticated myself, I like the freehand style, and I like the way that you can look at the picture in a general way, as opposed to in a relaxed way, as opposed to having to study the picture. I like the picture to speak to me,
right,
and absorb the colours and the sort of free flow of the painting.
Because this sort of painting is really out of fashion today, because it speaks to you, but it sort of doesn't say a lot, does it?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's hard to think why East can paint beautiful things. These little views of Japan are absolutely exquisite, and some of his things, but generally when he's painting this size, I find them, and I don't think I'm very different from the general public today, a bit boring.
Yeah, a bit too big.
Well, it's just, there's not much going on, and I don't think this is his best work either, this period. The way he melts all this in is fine, but he hasn't done terribly well here.
No.
It's not signed, but you are quite sure it's an East.
I'm confident that it's an East.
I'm confident it's an East too, so we'll agree on that.
But not one of his better ones.
No.
The family had owned both paintings for many years, and the guest never questioned which one mattered more. His favorite naturally seemed like the obvious choice. The appraiser, however, approached them very differently. Rather than personal taste, he examined the quality of the brushwork, the freshness of the colors, the balance of the composition, and how each painting fit within the artist's career. It didn't take long before one canvas clearly separated itself from the other, and the painting everyone expected to steal the spotlight quietly faded into the background.
Now, tell me about this. Tell me what you think about this.
I think this is far more vibrant and more interesting. It's small enough to hang in the living room, and it may have been a little bit nicer if the lady was facing us as opposed to away, but generally I find it's... isn't it? I don't know.
I think it's a good old gardener.
Is it?
Of the younger male variety myself, but...
Well, if these are nettles, he's got his work cut out.
I think it's a much better picture than that. It's got a better composition, it's more vibrant, and actually it's a different mentality.
The standout painting was identified as a work by Sir Alfred East, one of Britain's leading landscape painters of the late 19th century. East earned his reputation through peaceful countryside scenes filled with delicate light, subtle atmosphere, and remarkably confident technique. According to the appraiser, this painting possessed exactly the qualities collectors hope to find. Its vibrant palette, assured handling of paint, and overall strength suggested it came from one of the finest periods of the artist's career. That immediately made it the clear star of the pair.
A painting like this, which would have probably fetched a relatively large amount during his lifetime, is relatively small on today's market. So I would say £1,500, £2,000, something like that.
That's not too bad then.
This one, I think, really is a picture that would be desired. It's got a focal point. I can see sort of £6,000 to £8,000.
You're kidding me.
Well, why not?
That is fantastic. That is really good.
Sometimes the greatest value is hidden in the work that attracts the least attention. That's one of the reasons Antiques Roadshow continues to surprise viewers year after year. The experts don't simply place a price on a painting. They reveal the stories, the craftsmanship, and the hidden significance that most people would never notice. And every so often they prove that the true masterpiece has been hanging in plain sight all along. Number 20. Early John William Waterhouse Painting. For many collectors, discovering a painting by John William Waterhouse is the dream of a lifetime. His greatest masterpieces now hang in major museums or appear at prestigious international auctions where they can sell for millions of dollars. That's why it's almost impossible to imagine that a painting with a possible connection to Waterhouse could begin its story inside an old outbuilding.
I think it was in an old barn or a farm building for about 30 years. And then my father, he bought it about 20 years ago. I think it was a house sale for a few pounds. It wasn't expensive.
What did he think about it?
He liked it, but we didn't know how to get it restored.
Right.
So it just got left.
At first glance, the painting looked like nothing more than an old work that had suffered badly with age. The colors had faded, the surface showed significant wear, and several details had nearly disappeared over time. Most people would simply have seen a painting in need of restoration. The appraisers, however, looked far beyond its condition. They focused on the quality of the brushwork, the treatment of light, the modeling of the figure, and the overall composition. Within minutes, they began thinking of a name that rarely comes up on Antiques Roadshow.
Well, it's not really a Waterhouse. But it is signed JWW down here. And if I think about Waterhouse when he started painting, he was sort of experimenting. He wasn't really very well trained when he started painting. He painted little interiors and this sort of thing.
John William Waterhouse is best remembered for his poetic paintings inspired by Greek mythology, Arthurian legend, and classic literature. His early career, however, looked very different. Before developing the distinctive style that made him famous, he was still experimenting and refining his artistic voice. That makes his earliest works especially difficult to identify and particularly exciting for scholars. If the appraiser's opinion proved correct, the family wasn't simply looking at an old, damaged painting. They could be holding a remarkable glimpse into the beginning of Waterhouse's artistic journey.
It's in rotten condition, but this can be put right, although I think that will be difficult to clean. This area I'm not worried about, but the dirt is quite ingrained into that impasto there. I think between £5,000 and £10,000, £5,000 or £6,000 doing, and so does this. But I didn't see why, you know, finished and all done up, somebody might ask £20,000 for this.
Shock. I am shocked, I am. I thought about £500. I was so worried about the rip.
Well, it's pretty nasty. That is horrid, you know, and that's needs a lot of work.
So it's worth for me to take it and have it restored.
I think so, yes.
In its present condition, the painting was valued at £5,000 to £10,000. With careful professional conservation, the appraiser believed it could eventually be worth around £20,000. Sometimes, the greatest treasure isn't what can already be seen. It's what has been quietly waiting beneath the marks of time to be discovered. Number 21. Pair of English landscape paintings. Not every old painting has actually lost its beauty. Sometimes, the only thing hiding a work's true value is decades of dust, varnish, and cigarette smoke. That was exactly the case with this pair of English landscapes. For years, they had quietly hung on the family's walls, blending into the background like any other household decoration. No one gave them a second thought. Until an appraiser noticed something the family had completely overlooked.
Are you smokers in your family?
My parents were, and they've hung on their walls for 55 years.
Oh my goodness, that's quite a long time, isn't it? Because they are incredible. They're covered in sort of grime and nicotine and smoke and everything else, aren't they?
To the owners, these were simply two familiar paintings that had always been part of the home. After seeing them every day for so many years, it was easy to stop wondering where they came from or whether they might be valuable. The appraiser, however, immediately spotted the real issue. His attention wasn't drawn to the landscapes themselves. It was the heavy yellow-brown film covering the entire surface that caught his eye first.
But that's not a worry. In fact, in a way, that sort of preserved them. And what we should really do at some point is probably take them to a professional restorer and get them cleaned, because I think you'll suddenly see how wonderful these pictures are and how bright the colors are.
Decades of cigarette smoke had gradually settled into the varnish, hiding the painting's original colors beneath a dark amber haze. The encouraging news was that the paint underneath appeared to be remarkably well preserved. With proper professional conservation, much of the brightness and detail could return. But that wasn't what surprised the appraiser most. What truly caught his attention was the valuation the paintings had received years earlier.
Now, if you had this valued?
By a local.
A local?
Auction, yes.
Can you tell me what he said?
500.
£500 only?
Insurance value.
Insurance value. Well, I think he's mad. I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't say that, but I think they are. This sort of picture is so commercial, and when it's cleaned, you will see all its potential.
In the appraiser's opinion, the earlier valuation no longer reflected the painting's true worth. The market had changed considerably, and collectors now viewed works like these very differently. As a result, just one of the two paintings was now considered to be worth substantially more than anyone had previously believed.
I think he missed out on naught. I think it's 5,000. It's such a great picture, and it's got everything that a buyer would want.
Thank you very much.
It was the reminder that a painting doesn't lose its artistic quality just because time has hidden it beneath layers of grime. Sometimes, all it takes is the right expert looking a little closer to reveal the beauty that has been there all along. And that's exactly what continues to make Antiques Roadshow such an endlessly fascinating show. Number 22. Christopher Chamberlain Street Scene. What if a painting you bought for just £1 nearly ended up in the trash? It sounds like the kind of story that's too good to be true. Yet that's exactly how this painting found its way onto Antiques Roadshow. One small decision not to throw it away completely changed its future.
I only paid £1 for it, so I thought if it's not, I'll just get rid of it.
Get rid of it? What do you mean get rid of it?
Well, put it in the bin or something if it, if it wasn't.
The guest picked up the painting at a local car boot sale for only £1. He had no idea who the artist was and never imagined it might be valuable. Afterward, it was placed in the loft, where it sat forgotten for years. At one point, he even considered throwing it away while clearing out old belongings. Fortunately, he never did. Because within minutes of examining it, the appraiser realized this was far from an ordinary painting. What had looked like little more than an inexpensive decorative picture was actually the work of a respected British artist.
Did you know that in 1952 this was hung on the line in the Royal Academy at Burlington House? which means that it's at eye level, which is the highest accolade that a picture could be given. The RAF doesn't agree. The RAF really doesn't agree. I don't know where that came from. At any rate, yes, it was hung on the line in the Royal Academy. Now, that was the highest position, the best position it could possibly be given. So this picture was really rated.
The painting was identified as a work by Christopher Chamberlain, a British artist who regularly exhibited at the Royal Academy. He became well known for capturing the quiet charm of London's everyday streets with warmth and remarkable atmosphere. Although his name may not be widely recognized today, collectors continue to value his finest works. That identification completely transformed the story and led directly to the moment everyone had been waiting for.
I see. Well, if that's what you're going to do with it, you'd be throwing away 2,000 or 3,000 quid.
Oh. Ooh. Looking at it in a different light now.
So none of the explanation worked, but the money did.
Yeah.
From a £1 purchase at a car boot sale, the painting was now valued at £2,000 to £3,000. Stories like this are what make Antiques Roadshow so fascinating. Sometimes the greatest discoveries aren't hiding in famous galleries or prestigious auction houses. They're quietly waiting in attics, garages, and weekend markets, hoping that someone will recognize their true value before it's too late. Number 23. The Charge of the Light Brigade painting. Not every painting is remembered because of the artist who created it. Sometimes it is the story behind the canvas that gives it lasting significance. For many people in Britain, this scene is instantly recognizable. It depicts the Charge of the Light Brigade, one of the most famous episodes in British military history. Remembered as both an extraordinary display of courage and one of the most controversial battlefield decisions of the 19th century.
Tell me, what is your interest in the picture?
I like great military pieces, just, you know, the thought of the battle, really.
Romance. And have you known it for a long time?
I've known it for about 45 years.
Yes.
I was lucky my parents bought it and have since handed it to me.
Yes.
The family has treasured this painting for generations, not because they believed it was especially valuable, but because of the history it represents. It portrays the charge of the Light Brigade during the Crimean War in 1854, when British cavalry rode directly into enemy fire after a misunderstood order. Although the attack ended in tragedy, it became a lasting symbol of bravery and sacrifice, inspiring generations through poetry, literature, and art. That enduring legacy is one of the reasons paintings of this historic event continue to attract collectors today.
Well, it's interesting because the painting is by not a particularly well-known artist called Christopher Clark. The date is 1908, and what I particularly like, the way that the horses around, the fighting going on, the various movements, but then in the background, this veil of body colour obscuring what's happening behind, and I think this ghostly horse being thrown up in a moment of impact is beautifully represented. So in all, I think it's a masterpiece by somebody not particularly well known.
According to the appraiser, the painting's appeal extends far beyond its historical subject. It captures the energy and movement of the charge with remarkable intensity, from the cavalry surging forward to the chaos unfolding across the battlefield. That combination of historical importance and strong artistic execution makes it stand out among works depicting the same event and explains why it continues to resonate with collectors.
We come now to value. So I think this is probably somewhere in the range of £2,000 to £3,000.
That's fine, because I enjoy the painting.
Good. Well, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
The painting is valued at £2,000 to £3,000. That may not be the highest appraisal in today's countdown, but its significance has never been measured by price alone. It preserves the memory of one of the defining moments in British military history, while also carrying decades of meaning for the family who has cared for it. Sometimes, the most memorable works of art are not those with the highest price tags, but those that continue telling stories long after the events themselves have passed into history. Number 24. Charles Dorman Robinson Oil Painting. Not every hidden treasure is locked away in a vault or displayed in a gallery. Sometimes it is simply left behind on the side of the road. That is exactly how this story begins. An old painting was leaning against a fire hydrant, ignored by everyone who passed by. Only one person decided to stop, pick it up, and take it home. That ordinary decision would soon lead to one of the most memorable appraisals on Antiques Roadshow.
One day I was heading back to work. I was looking, for oncoming traffic and that, and noticed something down on the corner of the block I was coming across. And when I decided to go that way and take a look at it, there were numerous items on the corner in the yard that people were trying to get rid of, and this happened to be leaning against a fire hydrant.
Most people probably would have kept driving. Instead, the guest unknowingly rescued a work of art that might otherwise have disappeared forever. After only a few minutes of examination, the appraiser identified it as a painting by Charles Dorman Robinson, a respected California landscape artist of the late 19th century. That alone was an exciting discovery. But the story behind the artist made the painting even more remarkable. What looked like an abandoned canvas turned out to be part of a much larger story of survival, loss, and unexpected good fortune.
The 1906 earthquake hit, and they all burned. And then from that point on, he decided to keep them at his home. And in 1921, his home burned to the ground. If anyone had any luck in this story, it's me finding this, I think.
2 devastating fires destroyed a significant portion of Robinson's life's work, leaving relatively few of his paintings in existence today. As a result, every surviving example has become increasingly scarce and far more desirable to collectors. Its value comes not only from Robinson's artistic skill, but also from the simple fact that so much of his work has been lost forever. That rarity immediately caught the appraiser's attention.
Luckily enough, you saved a painting, but as you point out, his work suffered in terms of, through no fault of his own, a couple of calamitous events, the 1906 earthquake, a subsequent fire.
The appraiser's response went beyond the painting itself. In his view, the guest had done more than discover a forgotten artwork. He had preserved a small piece of California's artistic history. Had he driven past that day, the painting story might have ended on the curb instead of on Antiques Roadshow.
I think in today's market, if this painting appeared at auction, conservatively, $3,000 to $5,000.
Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's more than I thought.
The artist thanks you for saving it.
Yeah.
From a painting abandoned beside a fire hydrant, it is now valued at $3,000 to $5,000. The most memorable part of the story is not simply the appraisal. It is the fact that everything changed because one person decided to stop and take a closer look. That is what makes Antiques Roadshow so fascinating. Sometimes, the greatest treasures are found not through expert planning, but because someone chooses not to walk away. Number 25. Eclectic Art Collection. Every collector has a different philosophy. Some chase famous names. Others follow auction records and market trends. But the owner of this collection had a much simpler rule. If a painting had character, he wanted to live with it. That personal approach would eventually lead to one of the most surprising appraisals on Antiques Roadshow.
Well, this is a real artist group of pictures, and there's obviously a good reason for that.
Yes, well, I'm a painter myself, and some people might look at something like that and think it's just a scrappy drawing. But
no, but I mean, as an artist, presumably, you're more interested in personal things.
Yes, I am. I like the Sickert, because it's a very personal thing. It's almost as he's been sat at his chair and just drawn that.
Well, absolutely.
And also, it's not about technical brilliance. It's about character, and I think that that drawing has great character.
I couldn't agree with you more, and that's why. And I think actually everything you have here has character.
As a painter himself, he never collected art as an investment. Every piece entered the collection simply because it spoke to him. As the appraiser examined the paintings one by one, several familiar names immediately appeared, including Walter Sickert, Augustus John, and Patrick Hyman. It already looked like an impressive collection. But the biggest surprise had not yet arrived.
Sickert drawing. Very beautiful. I think £5,000 to £8,000, maybe a bit more.
Good gosh.
Good drawing. Augustus John suffers from his overproduction, as it were.
Yeah.
I think £1,000, £1,500 for that.
Yeah.
Patrick Hyman, being such a private artist, not discovered by the general public. You could buy a great painting by him like this for around £1,000, 1,500, something like that.
Those early valuations were exactly what experienced collectors would have expected. Walter Sickert remains one of Britain's most respected painters, while Augustus John and Patrick Hyman continue to hold steady places in today's market. Then the appraiser reached another painting, created by an artist whose name is far less familiar to most people. That was when the collection took an unexpected turn.
And finally, Alan Walton, the Alan Walton. Well, I don't know whether he has any value on the market as such. In other words, there's any record of value on that. I simply don't know. But that's a hell of a picture. I must say at least £10,000 to £15,000 on it. You know.
I'm very surprised.
The painting by Alan Walton turned out to be the standout piece of the entire collection. According to the appraiser, its confident brushwork, distinctive style, and artistic quality outweighed the artist's relatively modest reputation. It was a perfect reminder that in the art world, the most famous name is not always attached to the most valuable work.
I bought it from a gallery for next to nothing.
But why did you buy it? That's what I want.
Because I liked the looseness of it. I love the blue.
Yeah.
The skin tones with the blue I think are really nice. It really warmed it up for something that's quite cold.
The most memorable part of this appraisal was not simply that the Alan Walton painting was valued at £10,000 to £15,000. It was the collector's philosophy. He never tried to buy the biggest names or predict the market. He simply chose works that genuinely meant something to him. Over time, those personal choices became an extraordinary collection worth many thousands of pounds. It is another reminder that the best collections are often built not by following trends, but by following instinct, passion, and a genuine love of art.